One of the problems with starting a lot of seedlings at the same time is the easiest ways to do it is with them plastic seedling trays with all the little cell inserts. But even the really good ones, they don't last that many uses. Most of them are disposable, and even the really good ones, after you've used it a couple of years, it's going to have to go. There are a couple of alternatives out. One is the soil blocking things, you know, with the press that you push down on. We've got one, it's a good bit of kit, but after you've used it for a while, your hands are cramping up. It's a lot of work. So I was still looking around for an alternative. Anyway, we've got a duck pond that's got adjustable monks on it, so we can drop the water out to get all the nutrient loaded water into various other systems, including a paddy field, but also to access the mud that accumulates at the bottom of it, just so it doesn't silt up over time. So when I had the water dropped out of it a couple of weeks ago, when we were getting things ready and I was doing a bit of work on the pond while the ducks were in the paddy field, I thought, why not while I'm here? I had a couple of dwarf fruit trees that were just starting to bud out. So I got a couple of spadefuls of mud, chucked it at the bottom of each. And at the time we were going through a dry spell. And a couple of days later I came back, and that mud, instead of sitting in a nice little nutrient loaded layer, had cracked into geometric shapes. And it reminded me of something, you know, when you find like a reservoir or a lake or a loch or whatever has dropped down and you get that really nutrient loaded film, the layer about a foot deep right across the bottom of it. As it dries, it cracks in fairly predictable patterns. So I thought, what if we were to score that mud? When it dried out, would it separate out along the score lines? So I've run a few tests, and this is what we found out. Have a look at this. So I've just dropped all the water out of the duck pond so I can get to the muck in the bottom. So I'm going to I've got to do this left-handed. Let's have a look. It's going to get plenty of that into the bucket. That's step one. You can see I've got a couple of buckets of this stuff. You can see that wobble to it. That's all the gels that are built up with the anaerobic digestion. See, it's got a proper jelly sort of texture to it. It's not entirely like that. You see, it's not entirely gel. There is still a lot of muck in there, but you get the idea of the sort of texture that it is. So I've made up this frame out of an old bath panel, some scraps of plywood, and it's held together with sealant. It's really rough as. I made it out of the junk pile, and that's just a scrap of plywood with some screws in it to match. See how that lines up, so that each one of the cells has a screw head that lines up with the centre of it, roughly. So I've mixed up some nice slop, and what I'm going to do now, I'm going to put some into this tray and I'm going to put some onto the slab. Because obviously if we can do this onto concrete, that's all to the good. I've done this once in a tray, but yeah, let's see if we can get the same sort of results, because this is a really good technique. Right, so that's that done, and let's give this a test. Hang on. So the frame will do down onto that. That looks good. And we'll do a partial one there, and then we'll try, it's not quite the right size, but should pretty much work. And then let's lighten that up. Now, I want to have a try at ones that are bigger than that. I mean, these are, what's that, about 2 inches by 2 inches, which is a good starter, but I mean, yeah, these aren't exactly central. Hang on, let's give that another. There we go. Yeah, it's mud. It's still malleable. There we go. I think that'll work a bit better. But if I wanted bigger ones, to save up making up a frame, all I've got, and for these ones over here, I want to try larger ones, because these will be good for starter plants, but you know, for something bigger, I've just got that. And we'll do exactly the same thing, just one by one. We can always make up a bigger frame later. Because I haven't got a dibber the right size, I'm going to make do with that. Yeah, it's a bit wetter, this mix. Just wanting to cling to my finger a little bit. But just, you know, a frame with dowels mounted on it would work pretty well. Right, now I'm going to leave this out to see how well this dries off. I'm going to put this one at the greenhouse if it looks like it's going to rain, but we should be okay, and we'll see what happens when they dry off a little bit. So it's been 3 days since I did these, and you can see it's pretty much worked. You can see how much deeper, I mean the scoring that I did was only about a centimetre deep, and you can see how lower down in the cracks is actually fractured along those lines. It's worked pretty well here. The only thing that could be improved is the seed holes, but I thought of, you know, actually these work pretty good. You can see that, but yeah, obviously I didn't do a great job of pressing these things out, but you can see how they want to fracture along the lines that I've given them. So what I've got there is a method, look, that's still even damp, is a method for doing soil blocks with none of the pressing, none of the work. You can imagine, you know, a tray like this that took, what, seconds. So you can imagine 10, 15 of them side by side. Within half an hour you could make all the soil blocks you'd need for a year. That's quicker than you can get them from the shops. Right, you see how that's very cool. And I've seen, yeah, that's from where the split was. Look at that, that's individual blocks are just pulling out. Huh. I'm going to call that a roaring success. And I've seen, like yesterday evening, this was hard baked. It was rock solid. In fact, let's see. It's even coming apart here. It was rock solid. And yet, we had a heavy dew fall at night. So even where it's proper joined, it's still where the score line was, it's still breaking there. And when we had a heavy dew fall at night, even though it hadn't rained, these things absorb moisture and they swell up slightly. So all that gel is still active in it, it's just dehydrated. So you could make these things by the thousand, stick them in the greenhouse until they're bone dry, box them up, and they'd be shelf stable. So I suppose you could mix this mud with other composts, other fillers like coir or peat, if you could find a good source, you know, an ethical source, and improve on it. But it'd be interesting to see just how they work just like this, because it's loaded with nutrients, it's got a natural form of like the swell gel, those commercial products you got in it, and it stores indefinitely. Very cool. So that's my alternative to the soil blocker and plastic trays and all of the rest. I didn't show you the bigger ones, but they've come out pretty much the same. The only thing that didn't work quite so well, the indentation for the seed didn't come out quite so good. So I went around the next day with my pinky and just did it again, cheated a bit. But you can still see, you know, they worked really well. Still want to break in all the right places. And that's been 3 days in the sun, windy. It's been a bit of dew at night, but not much. You know, I've still had to water the garden. And that's still really moist. That's held on to water after 3 days, so that's really encouraging. Obviously I've got to try growing in them yet, but I don't anticipate there being any problems. It's, you know, nutrient loaded mud, you know. So what we're going to do now, whenever I empty the water out of that pond, which is very easy to do with all the adjustable earthworks, I'm going to get a blue plastic barrel with a lid. I'm going to about half fill that up with the muck at the bottom of the pond, and that's me set. I can make these things, I can make them and store them, but I can also make them by the thousand in an afternoon very easily. You know, I mean, it's just another 20 minutes on top of pricking them out anyway, just to do this. And you could seed them when they're still wet, label them up, and you're good. You know, you can walk away from for 4 days or so, as long as you give them the slightest bit of care, and that's it. You're going to get seedlings, and it'll fracture out and create that gap to keep them as separate seedlings as they dry. It's very cool. I'm really pleased with this technique, and it's just a yield on top of a system that I've already got, and it's quick and easy. That's the thing. There's no point having, right, I can do away with plastic trays, but it only costs me 3 days of intense labour every year to do so. That's just not going to be cost effective for anyone. This is something that I can do in like 10 minutes, maybe, to a job I'm already doing, which is taking the water out of the pond. I just harvest that mud while I'm going, which is a useful thing to do anyway, because it keeps the pond a bit clearer for the ducks. And yeah, I can chuck it on the beds or whatever, but I can keep the nice gel-based stuff back for this. And yeah, I need never buy soil blocks again. I'm not even sure I'm going to use my soil blocker anymore. Yeah, another free yield on top of what I've already got with minimal work. Don't you love permaculture systems?